found in very many cases around Europe. So I'm born in Greece. I have lived many years in Greece. I'm also Swedish, and I have lived equally many years in Sweden. And now, since more than 12 years, I live and work in Finland. I think I'm very typical of the Europe we have. I'm born to a so-called Swedish man who discovered recently that his mother had been handed over to a Swedish family from a Sami origin. My own grandfather was probably expelled from Germany sometime in the late 1880s. We don't know much about it. So this is kind of the pattern that we have in Europe. And today we have what I would call a general confusion, since we have come from a bipolar world of the Cold War to the multipolar world that we experience today. This shift from the clear polarization between the East and the West is a positive thing, even though confusion is there. So we need to adapt, as was also invoked by Andrea Gross, this thinking about minorities from the bipolar world to a multipolar world. And I disagree perhaps a little bit with Boris when he describes the minority system as the outcome of the end of the Cold War. No, the minority system is the outcome of at least 150 years of debates in Europe. And next year, we will also be celebrating the 230 years since the French Revolution. And my plea to you is not to use the term populist as easily and lightly as is done. Because Robespierre, one of the great figures of the French Revolution, who protected the rights of minorities and the freedom of expression in his first part of life, then was also a fundamentalist who killed everyone that disagreed with him. So perhaps he could have been called a socialist originally, and then he turned into a proponent of terror. So we cannot live with this compartmentalization of identities while we need to respect the cultural diversity. I think this is possible to be done today, and many countries try to do it. You can reframe minority issues. You can put them into sustainable development goal debates, which is a global discussion, not only a European. And you can also think about the way you use democracy. And perhaps we shall continue this discussion. There are two ways of looking at democracy, at least. One is to appeal to the general will of the people. We shall decide, the people shall decide, popular sovereignty, whatever the people may say. But unfortunately, sometimes the people does not render very good results. And this is why we have representative pluralist democracy, which rests on the idea of the rule of law. So I think that also social democracy has a lot to think about the words and the priorities you propose. I would like to address briefly what I see as the main areas of development, and I believe that they have already been mentioned several times. One is education. And I have seen all over Europe, and also in my research results, that there is a lot of debate about minority education, but actually quite little experimentation and effort in educating the teachers. So it is the grown-ups in the educational framework, the parents and the teachers, that give the results. So what you do in your pedagogical institutes is the crucial thing. And finally, in my most recent research, we have understood that there is a general turn towards securitizing everything. This securitization is coupled with the mixing up of civil goals and means with military goals and means. This is a very dangerous path, and I hope that our countries will be able to withstand this temptation of security and the security fear, because Europe has managed terrorism, Europe has overcome war, we can manage the crisis and confusion, stay calm in the boat, and don't be over-exaggerating. Thank you.
Thank you, Sia. Okay. Yeah. Yes, of course, I'm highly tempted to answer, but probably I will refrain at this point if we have some time. And then, and thank you for mentioning this problem of securitization. I believe this is really a key issue related to minorities now, and we really see some effects also in the Baltic states. When minorities are scapegoated for something what they have nothing to do, in fact, and they are simply manipulated in a sense and utilized in much more difficult interstate relations and so on. So there is really a lot to think about. So Serban, please, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Boris, for opening this discussion, and thank you very much, all of you, for inviting me to this Concord. I'm here for the second time in my life in Riga. I told Boris yesterday that I was here 17 years ago, during President Iliescu as a state advisor for legal affairs, an official visit in Riga and Vilnius. At that time, as I recall, President of your country was Mrs. Vaira Freiberga, I think. Well, starting politics in 1989 with the revolution, I passed all these years seeing all the changes that transformed my country and the rest of Europe after the Cold War. And of course, the issue of minority rights was always on the table of discussion. I don't know if Romania is a model for the rest of European countries, but our model can give you some ideas in order to approach what we see as minority rights and minority issue. Starting in 1991, we established in our constitution that we offer seats in the Chamber of Deputies. We have a bicameral parliament for each national minority lives in Romania unless they get their seats through elections. So now we have in Romanian parliament two different situations. We have the Hungarian minority, which is organized as a party. They receive more than 5% seats in the parliament, so they have deputies and senators, representing now 7% of the total amount of parliamentarians. They have 21 deputies and 9 senators, which means groups in both chambers of our parliament. We also have one member of the House of Deputies for 17 minorities, which means Germans, Greeks, Jews, Serbians, Bulgarians, Russians, Ukrainians, and so on, Czechs, Slovaks, you name it, 17 ethnic minorities, according to our long history of common living in the Carpathian and the Danube area. So starting with this, we have established since 1991 at a governmental level a department for ethnic minorities in order to support from the central governance of Romania, according to the effort of the local authorities, the maintaining and developing of cultural identity and to preserve what was considered and is still considered their benchmarks for ethnic minorities like language, religion, tradition, and so on. Right now, we are still having television programs and radio programs in native languages. We have, for Hungarians, more than 3.5 hours per week. For Germans, 1.5 hours per week, and other minorities have also programs in their native language, which includes, of course, music, poetry, artistical creations. You see, we all listened to an impressive artist at the beginning of this Concord. She sings quite impressive in 4 different languages. The music sounds beautiful in 4 different languages. We all use English as the most common language in order to understand each other throughout all of Europe, probably celebrating Brexit. We use English. And that says that we can understand each other, we can find our common values, and we also can bring minority values at the top level of our life. It's hard to say if I'm belonging to a majority in my country or a minority in a different country. I don't know exactly what are my true origin. I'm saying myself I'm a Romanian. And I know what my parents were, or my grandparents were, but before that, let's not be so specific and not be so sure that we are 100% belonging to a certain ethnical group. I want to tell you that in that short video presenting Neil's international activity, you saw Mrs. Corina Crețu. It's a colleague of mine, a good friend of mine. She's the European Commissioner for Regional Policy. And we also can use this vehicle of regional development in order to preserve and sustain the tradition and the cultural identity of minorities. Probably it's easier to connect the 2 first panels of your Concord, Changing Europe and Minority Rights in Europe, because they are related. It's an important part of the Changing Europe, how we deal with the minority rights. It's hard to say in Europe which ethnical group is a minority, because we turn down the borders, we're traveling free throughout all of the European Union. I hope so that we extend the European Union to the rest of the European countries. And we have to trust each other that there is no ethnical minority. We're all Europeans. Probably European citizenship will be a step forward in order to diminish the effects of this kind of unnatural border between us. Sia told all of us before that she is a Greek, lived for many years in Sweden, and now living in Finland. Who can tell where she is belonging to a majority or a minority ethnical group? And she feels fine, and we all feel fine throughout all over Europe. So probably it will be much more successful, let me say like this, if we can get some questions from the Concord and we can answer with our experience as it is. And we also can get some new, fresh ideas approaching this kind of discussion. Thank you very much, Boris.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Serban. It's an excellent idea, but we should, in this case, to